Good evening. My name is Rylan Slater. I am representing myself, Charles Dempy-Wolf, and Neth Curley, and we are presenting on the video game Balatro and its role as an innovative game in the gaming industry. So, to start off, we have a brief overview of the gaming industry. The gaming industry is made up of many different producers and firms of varying sizes, with millions of customers around the world. The industry has been estimated in recent years to generate over $200 billion in revenue annually. So, some companies you may have already heard of, which are typically very large and wealthy, are often called AAA companies. These typically have high budgets for development and marketing and massive teams. Their games are often take several years to develop, and they usually sell their products at a much higher price than your smaller developers would. Now, for the smaller developers, these people are typically referred to as indie developers. These are individuals or small teams who have a low financial backing, often create games as hobbyistically or out of passion, and they usually don't sell too many copies. However, video games are a creative medium, and the industry can be categorized as a blue ocean, meaning that new games can create value by differentiating themselves from pre-existing games in various different ways. Games can be categorized by different genres which hope to appeal to specific consumers. For example, there are action games, there are role-playing games, there are story-driven games, there are point-and-click adventure games. Many genres overlap and try to create an experience that suits specific consumers. So, many of these AAA games typically have very high selling prices because they take so long to develop and they often spend a lot of money. However, many AAA games release their games for free and they focus on generating their revenue through microtransactions. What is a microtransaction? Well, they are typically cosmetic or gameplay enhancing items that are purchasable for in-game credits. The catch? In-game credits are typically bought with money. So, these are games like Fortnite Battle Royale or Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and they make hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars in profit each year, regardless of their free price. These microtransactions rake in profits by being very visually attractive, and often by having gambling systems built into them. So in CSGO, there are these things called loot crates, and you can pay $2.50 to buy a key, which will give you a random skin for a gun you have in the game. Most of these skins don't cost very much, but some of them are very rare and can cost upwards of hundreds or even thousands of dollars. To see how effective this microtransaction model is, here we have a survey from 2020 in which 77% of respondents reported spending money on in-game purchases for Fortnite. Additionally, the average amount a user spent on these microtransactions was $102.42. This results in extreme revenues each year, shown in the graph. An important thing to note is that for many of these games, companies are trying to appeal to a set of consumers called whales. These are a very small group of people who will be willing to shell out massive sums of cash on the games. So although it says that the average amount a user spends on microtransactions is 102, that average is probably pulled to a higher number than it would be without the presence of these so-called whales. Now, I briefly mentioned it before, but Counter-Strike has its own in-game gambling system. This lets it generate a lot of money, uh, approximately $980 million in 2023. Now, I personally have some experience with this game, and I can attest to once having blown away about $250 on the video game. Um, it is a very addictive system. You open a container, and all of the possible skins that you could get are cycled through on like a slot machine, and it will land on a skin, and it's usually about 17 cents. You get lucky, you might get even $30 or $100 or 200. The most I ever made in that $200 was 30. Turning a profit as an individual is very rare. So, when a AAA game sells well, it typically inspires other game producers as well as rival companies to start making games that are very similar. This can be healthy competition, but often it incentivizes companies to follow each other's toxic revenue models, and it can also lead to bloating within the industry. So, a recent company which tried to model the 5v5 hero shooter genre, popularized by games like Overwatch or Counter-Strike Global Offensive or Rainbow Six Siege, is a game called Concord, produced by Sony. So this was shut down within 2 weeks of its launch, with refunds being given out for everybody who bought it at $40. Its failure to us was a problem of differentiation. Its character designs are rather boring and flat. The art style, while quote unquote realistic, doesn't have anything going for it uh, that differentiates itself from anything else. Other games in the genre, like Overwatch or Valorant, have very poppy colors and a big focus on like sci-fi action, which kind of compensates for their genericness. Rainbow Six Siege has a focus on stealth and reconnaissance, which also gives it a space of differentiation. Additionally, Overwatch and Valorant, at least, are free, um, which means that most buyers just didn't want to purchase this game, hence its massive failure. So, what Concord may have wanted to go for was a space at the low end of markets. As I already mentioned, some AAA developers create games that are free to play and then get all their money through microtransactions. So these developers will usually try to strike a balance between having exclusive skins, which you must spend money on, as well as free cosmetics that come out yearly at a small rate, but a very visible rate, in order to incentivize free-to-players to keep playing. An example includes League of Legends with its champion skins, which you can unlock through play, or Valorant and its weapon wraps, which are usually like $20 a gun, um, and it's purely cosmetic, and Fortnite Battle Royale, whose rotating shop is algorithmically designed to give consumers fear of missing out for not buying the newest items while still available in the shop. If an item's not in the shop, it is unpurchasable. This actually got Fortnite in a lawsuit by the Federal Trade Commission after being reported that it was using this algorithm in order to like discourage people from not spending money on the game. Um, there's quite a bit of shady psychology at work in some of these games in their systems of in-app purchases. So, enough of these AAA companies. We've spoke about them long enough. Now here's what we're really here for. So, indie developers are rarely tied to any large organization, and a lot of developers create games as a hobby. Indie games tend to feature experimental gameplay that differs from trends that AAA games like to follow. This is because indie games typically have a very low barrier to entry, and since people create them hobbyistically without necessarily having revenue as a primary focus, they can explore a lot more than companies would be allowed with big budgets and shareholder obligations. Some of these gameplay differences can range from unique interpretations of existing games, video game versions of tabletops, or just gamifying everyday tasks. One example I can think of off the top of my head is a video game called 5D Chess. It's a remake of chess that features 5 different spatial dimensions, and I do not understand it. If an indie game is fortunate to generate public attention, which they often don't, there are quite a few of them, those developers may be reached out to by certain publishers. The role of a publisher is to financially support developers so they may focus primarily on game development, while they also handle marketing and sales objectives. So, for instance, after a few months of success with Balatro, the developer Local Thunk was reached out to by a London publisher known as PlayStack. PlayStack came to him with a business plan, and Local Thunk felt that he was in good hands, and so he made a deal with them. And now PlayStack is Balatro's publisher. Here I have linked an interview with Local Thunk from the roguelike podcaster Dan Giesling, as well as a link to the PlayStack homepage, which is the main page of the developer. So, you may have seen on that previous slide the word roguelike and wondered, well, what is that? A roguelike and its cousin roguelites are genres of games in which every run you play, the items, enemies, and stage layouts that you encounter are randomized. In a roguelite, which is what we are focused on today, you can unlock items during runs which will show up in later runs. A pure roguelike doesn't have this. Game 1 and Game 100 may have the exact same things happen in them. Most games in this category can be compared in terms of how much a single run's win leans more on luck or raw knowledge. Some of these games have higher floors or ceilings in terms of balance. Their runs can be more or less random, and there's typically a measure of skill and luck both required to win a single one of these games. So, the more of a roguelite game you play, the more you get to a point where you can reliably win pretty much any game in front of you, regardless of how bad your luck is. How do developers answer this? Well, difficulty modes. A lot of roguelites will add higher difficulty levels for seasoned players who still want a challenge. Here are a couple different games which I have played, and how difficulty can be changed in them. So in Risk of Rain 2, if you understand the game systems well enough, you can win pretty much any run on one of its normal difficulties, which range from drizzle, rainstorm to monsoon. However, if you really want to test your skills, you can play on Eclipse mode, where each run goes through Eclipse 1 through 8, every win getting you to Eclipse 2, 3, 4, and so on. Each level of Eclipse adds a new balance change to make the game harder. For example, at Eclipse 1, you start the game at half health. At Eclipse 3, the fall damage you take is doubled and can kill you. At Eclipse 4, I believe, enemy move speed is doubled. And at Eclipse 8, a fraction of the damage you take every time you get hit is permanent health lost for the rest of the stage. In Hades, you can increase the difficulty of your runs with the Pact of Punishment, which gives you various different difficulty modifiers which you can stack at your leisure. Some examples of these, maybe an enemy that you kill will drop a bomb upon its death. Maybe you are under a certain time constraint. Maybe environmental damage is doubled. Winning at higher difficulties grants rewards which may let you customize your main base or upgrade your abilities and weapons between runs. Now on to Balatro. In Balatro, you can play a run with a variety of different decks, each having different attributes. Pictured here is the blue deck, in which you get one extra hand to play every round. Also featured here is the stake. There are 8 different stakes going from white, red, green, black, blue, brown, orange, and gold. Each stake adds another modifier, which makes the game harder and harder. In an interview with Dan Giesling, as I mentioned in the last slide, Local Thunk says that if you understand the game well enough, you can win pretty much every run at White Stake. Now, Gold Stake is an entirely different beast. Gold Stake, it takes a lot of skill and a lot of luck to complete. Before I explain Balatro in depth, I want to talk again about that blue ocean strategy. We already discussed how the blue ocean, in terms of industries, is any place where there is undiscovered value that is yet to be found and can be created at any moment. The gaming industry is a blue ocean because developers of any scale, great or small, can add differentiation to their products in ways that just have not existed before them. We believe Balatro does this for roguelites in 2 ways. It raises accessibility for its players because it doesn't rely on reflexes and rather focuses on measured and methodical thinking. A lot more people can access it and play it, and it also does something that games like it don't have, which is a simulation of gambling, much to be distinguished from the real gambling of some of those AAA games we discussed earlier. So, coming up, we have a couple slides that describes your average Balatro game. So, a Balatro game is made up of 8 antes. In this picture below, on the bottom left highlighted, we can see we're on ante 5. Each ante consists of a small blind, a big blind, and a boss blind, which has a special effect that'll make winning it more difficult. The small and big blinds can be skipped for different tags, which can give you benefits in the shop, which we will see later. Your goal in each blind is to score above a certain chip requirement. So, the objective of a single blind is to beat a certain minimum score requirement of that specific blind. You can play poker hands. You have a set number of hands to play and discards to use. And you go through a typical deck of 52 cards. There are a few consumables which you can use that'll modify your card deck. As you can see, I only have 51 cards here because I actually destroyed one earlier in this run. Up here, this deck, these are called Joker cards. These hang outside your typical card deck and they have unique modifiers that'll add to the total score your hands play. After every blind in Balatro, you can go to the shop, where you're given a certain amount of money and have to make investment decisions carefully in order to ensure that you'll continue to score high amounts of chips. Here in the shop, we have a joker called the Spare Trousers. That joker gains +2 multiplier, which will be added to every hand you play, every time you play a card called 2 Pair. Alongside it is a planet card. Planet cards will upgrade the level of the hands that you have in the game. Uranus correlates to the 2 Pair hand, so these two cards synergize quite well together. In the bottom right of the shop, you can see a Jumbo Standard Pack and an Arcana Pack. A Standard Pack will give you one of 5 potential playing cards, which you can add to your deck. Some of these may have special effects on them. The Arcana Pack provides tarot cards. I already have one in my consumables slot in the top right. It's labeled the Hangman. These will affect your playing cards. Some of them can enhance cards to make them multiplicative. Some of them can just destroy cards. The Hangman right here, it destroys cards. I used one of these earlier, and that's why I only have 51 cards in my deck. So I talked about how Balatro simulates the feeling of gambling. Here I have a video of me playing through the boss blind of Ante 8 trying to beat the game, in which I hope to express that a little bit more. So, I go in, and you can see that this boss blind is Amber Acorn. I can't tell what jokers are where. I'm playing for flush hands in this build, specifically flush hearts, which is why I am discarding a bunch of cards that are not hearts. I also have a unique card called Hit the Road, which gives you a additional 0.5 times multiplier on your total score every time you discard a jack in the current round. So I focused on discarding jacks, and I played a hand, and look at that, far over that 100,000 score requirement. In summation, Balatro has a number of unique traits which differentiate itself from its own competitors, while also being a project born purely out of passion. Because it holds so many potential combinations and win conditions, and because it's a game you can play at your own pace while searching for optimal strategies, Balatro is an increase to accessibility amongst its roguelite peers. Additionally, you can pause or resume a game at will, which further captures some would-be gamers whose schedule is too tight to sit down and commit to a long game session. I actually got my mom to buy this game. Because the game has a cohesive stylistic theme around poker, and because you don't know the score you're going to land until after you played the hand, it creates a guilt-free simulation of the sort of endorphin rush people get from gambling. You know the moment on the slot machine when you see 7, 7, and the last digit still spinning? That's what Balatro simulates. It is only fake gambling, and all the value you get at the game is uh, comes with its $15 sale price and time. It's much more honest than a lot of these free games that I've spoken about with their microtransaction revenue models. Its user-friendly gameplay and its addicting hook allowed it to amass millions of sales across various consoles. Just a few months ago, it opened up on the iOS and Android app stores, and it became the top-selling game on both within 24 hours. This game was lightning in a bottle, and I think it highlights the potential of indie development as an answer to stagnation within the video game industry. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.